What you can hear are the top stories. Death toll in Plateau attacks hits 52. Scavenger dies, 3 hospitalized as military grenade explodes in Lagos. WTO warns US tariffs may shrink global trade. Court halts per-week rally in Bayelsa. Court slams heavy restriction on Akpabio, Natasha, Senate, others. APC speaks on replacing Shettima as Tinubu's vice in 2027. North Central push for slot. And also, Tinubu's political advisor Hakim Baba Ahmed resigns. Details now. Thank you for staying with us. The death toll in attacks by gunmen in some communities in Bokos Local Government Council of Plateau State has now risen to 52. The chairman of Bokos Cultural Development Council, Vanguard Farmasun Fudang, who confirmed the development to journalists in just today, said this followed the recovery of 40 more corpses on Wednesday and Thursday night, while the search and rescue team kept combing the bushes for missing persons. Correspondents report that gunmen had attacked Manguru Tamiso, Dafo, Manguna, Tagai, Hurti, and Tadai communities of Bokos local government area of the state on the night of April 2nd, 2025, and then opened fire on innocent citizens. Meanwhile, the state government said some suspects have been arrested in connection with the killings in the 5 communities, but none of them have been disclosed. Rather, none of their identities have been disclosed. The State Commissioner for Information and Communications, Mrs. Joyce Ramdap, made the disclosure in a statement made available to correspondents in Jos, the Plateau State capital. Also, you do recall that Governor Caleb Muftwang and his administration have disclosed that they remain fully committed to ensuring the safety and security of Plateau residents. The statement added that security agencies have deployed and dominated these areas to ensure normalcy returns at the shortest possible time. Ramnap called on all residents to remain vigilant and report any suspicious activities to the relevant security agencies. While here in Lagos, an unfortunate development occurred earlier on today. In the same vein, a yet-to-be-identified scavenger has been killed by a military-grade grenade which exploded at Idiaraba in the Mushin area of Lagos State. VOP News learned that 3 other persons were injured in the incident which occurred on Thursday. However, VOP News gathered that some of the persons scavengers in a metal scrapyard were attempting to dismantle one of the grenades in their possession. The device, however, detonated in the process, killing one of them on the spot, while 3 others sustained severe injuries. A resident right there who spoke with correspondents earlier today said that the explosion, which occurred in the afternoon, also resulted in panic among citizens and residents along that axis. He also disclosed that while residents panicked, they tried to move to safe areas. 2 undetonated grenades were said to have been found after security operatives arrived at the spot. Another resident, whose name may not be mentioned, cited security reasons, said the injured persons had been taken to the hospital. When contacted, the State Police Public Relations Officer Benjamin Hundeyi confirmed the incident, adding the Explosive and Ordnance Department of the command has rendered the place safe. Also, the scene of the incident has been cordoned off. There is zero possibility of another explosion. An investigation has, however, commenced. Meanwhile, the Director General of the World Trade Organization, Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, has warned the recent tariffs imposed by the United States could significantly affect global trade and economic growth. On April the 2nd, U.S. President Donald Trump announced global tariffs on all imports, including a 14% tariff on goods from Nigeria. In a statement issued on Thursday, Okonjo-Iweala emphasized that the WTO is closely monitoring the situation and engaging with member countries about the potential economic impacts. She noted that many WTO members have expressed concerns and the organization is working to address these concerns. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala cautioned that these these new tariffs, in combination with other trade measures introduced earlier this year, could result in a global trade contraction of about 1%, marking a downward revision of nearly 4 percentage points from previous estimates. She disclosed further that the risk of escalating trade tensions, which could lead to retaliatory tariffs and further reductions in trade. Despite the recent measures, Okonjo-Iweala reminded that the majority of global trade still operates under the WTO's most favored nation terms, although this share has declined from 80% at the start of the year to 74%. And now to court-related matters. The High Court of Bayelsa State sitting in Yenagoa has issued an interim order restraining associates of the Federal Capital Territory Minister Nyesom Wike from holding a planned rally in the state. The rally, which was scheduled to take place in Yenagoa, the capital of Bayelsa State, on April 12, 2025, is part of an event organized by the new associates group to show solidarity for Minister Wike. Honorable Justice I.A. Uzaka granted the motion ex parte in a suit filed by Bayelsa State Attorney General Briyai Dambo. The court's order, which temporarily halts the planned rally, names Mr. George Turner, the lead convener of the rally, and Minister Nyesom Wike as the first and second defendants and respondents in the case. The Niger Police Force, the Inspector General of Police, and the Commissioner of Police for Bayelsa State were also named as defendants in the suit. The court has adjourned the matter to April 11, 2025 for the hearing of the motion of notice for an interlocutory injunction. Meanwhile, still on court-related matters, a federal high court in Abuja has issued an order preventing parties involved in the lawsuit filed by suspended Senator Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan against Senate President Godswill Akpabio and 3 others from granting press interviews concerning the case. Justice Binta Inyako made the ruling today after Akpabio's lawyer Kainde Ogunwumiju complained that the plaintiff had been granting interviews on the matter, visiting multiple television stations despite the case being pending in court. In her ruling, Justice Inyako stated that there would be no press interviews by any of the parties or their lawyers regarding the case. Additionally, she prohibited the parties and their lawyers from streaming court proceedings on social media. Recall that the Chief Judge of the Federal High Court, Justice John Soho, had recently reassigned the case filed by Senator Akpoti-Uduaghan against Akpabio and others to Justice Binta Inyako. Well, VP News gathered that the case, which was previously before Justice Obiora Egwatu, proceeded under Justice Inyako with a hearing held today. The suit filed by the suspended senator representing Kogi Central Senatorial District challenges the Senate's investigation of her alleged misconduct. It seeks to prevent the Senate Committee on Ethics, Privileges and Public Petitions from continuing its disciplinary proceedings over her alleged actions during a plenary session on February 20, 2025. The case, which was earlier heard by Justice Egwatu, but he recused himself from the matter on March 25, 2025, after allegations of bias were raised by the Senate President. The third defendant, Justice Egwatu, in his withdrawal statement noted that a litigant's belief in a judge's bias could hinder the pursuit of justice, and thus he decided to step down from hearing the case. Meanwhile, the Chief Press Secretary to the Chairman of the Independent National Electoral Commission, Rotimi Eyekomi, has disclosed that the Nigerian Constitution places no limit on how many times a lawmaker can be subjected to a recall process. Eyekomi made the remark on Thursday while speaking during a monitored television program. Well, the statement comes amid controversy surrounding the failed attempt to recall Senator Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan, the lawmaker representing Kogi Central. He added that for any recall to succeed, the petition must meet the constitutional requirement of signatures from at least 50% plus one of registered voters in the affected constituency. Well, INEC, as you do know, had earlier announced that the recall petition against Akpoti-Uduaghan failed to meet the constitutional threshold. The number of verified signatures, the commission said, fell short of the required 50% of voters in Kogi Central. Now, in a very recent development, the Ruling All Progressives Congress has refuted allegations suggesting a rift between President Bola Ahmed Tinubu and Vice President Kashim Shettima. The party dismissed as unfounded speculations that Tinubu might replace Shettima as his running mate in the 2027 elections. This comes amid growing political activity from Tinubu's loyalists and key party stakeholders who have begun mobilizing support for his potential re-election, even though the president has yet to formally declare his intention for a second term. In a recent interview, the APC's National Director of Publicity, Bala Ibrahim, criticized the rumors, calling them baseless and pure speculation. He emphasized that such discussions could not be taken seriously, labeling them as beer parlor talks. He further clarified that even if for any reason the president were to consider replacing the vice president, he cannot do so single-handedly. Such a decision would require extensive consultation with critical stakeholders. Meanwhile, political stakeholders from Nigeria's North Central region have renewed their demand for either the presidency or the vice presidency in the upcoming 2027 elections. Representatives from Plateau, Nasarawa, Benue, Niger, Kogi and Kwara states convened in Abuja, led by Professor Nagubu Kuso, who to make their case. In a communique issued after the meeting, the stakeholders called on major political parties to allocate the presidential or vice presidential tickets to the northern region. They further suggested that should the APC grant President Tinubu the right of first refusal for the presidency, the vice presidency should be zoned to the North Central. Professor Ngabu, supported by other regional leaders, pointed out that since Nigeria's return to democracy in 1999, North Central is yet to produce a democratically elected president or vice president. Meanwhile, the president, that's the political advisor to President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, Dr. Hakim Baba Ahmed, has tendered his resignation. Sources within the presidency confirmed lately that Baba Ahmed, a former spokesman for the Northern Elders Forum, submitted his resignation about 2 weeks ago. However, as of the time of reporting, it remains unclear whether the presidency has formally accepted his resignation. Baba Ahmed was appointed special advisor on political matters in the office of Vice President Kashim Shettima in September 2023. Throughout his tenure, he represented the presidency at various public events, including the National Conference. Also, his role within the presidency had attracted occasional criticism. A notable point of contention arose in April 2024 when Bello Mohammed Matawale, the Minister of State for Defense, criticized northern appointees, including Baba Ahmed, for failing to defend the administration amidst accusations of misrepresentation. You're currently listening to the World News right here in Voice of the People, 90.3 FM. We'll take a very short break. When we return, more news, and obviously we'll head into our news analysis segment. Do kindly stay with us. Thank you for staying with us. This is still the World News at 6 right here on Voice of the People, 90.3 FM. The Supreme Court has set aside the judgment of the Court of Appeal in Abuja that recognized Julius Aburi as the national chairman of the Labour Party. VOP News understand that the Supreme Court, in a unanimous judgment today by a 5-member panel, held that the Court of Appeal lacked the jurisdiction to pronounce Aburi the national chairman of the Labour Party, having earlier found that the substance of the case was about party's leadership. Meanwhile, it had held that the issue of leadership was an internal affair of the party over which courts lacked jurisdiction. The Supreme Court allowed the special appeal filed by Senator Nanadu Usman and others and held that it was meritorious. It proceeded to dismiss a cross-appeal filed by Aburi's faction of the Labour Party for being meritorious. Well, on the 17th of January 2025, the appeal court in Abuja, in a judgment delivered by Justice Hama Baraka, recognized Aburi as Labour Party's national chairman. Well, let's take a listen to one of the Labour Party's representative after the court session where the Supreme Court declared that Julius Aburi is no longer the Labour Party chairman.
It's nothing unusual, because the real issue here is that when they went to, Julius Aburi and his group went to the Federal High Court, they went and made a claim that they were entitled to be the leaders of the party. Then that judgment was set aside by the Court of Appeal. But in so doing, the Court of Appeal went ahead and declared Abu the national chairman. So when we came to the Supreme Court looked at the cases and said that no, that since the two lower courts have found that the substantive dispute was the issue of leadership of a political party, that they had no jurisdiction to pronounce Abure as national chairman of the party, and that their judgments were not out of jurisdiction, and they set aside the judgment. And also the Supreme Court went ahead to make the point that political parties, on the need for political parties to be well guided by their constitution and guidelines, especially on the issue of tenure of officers. And that Julius Abure's tenure, he has outlived his tenure. So that is the purpose of the judgment. And that the issue of who determines leadership of a political party is entirely within the domestic realm of a political party, and not for the two lower courts to look at. So that is essentially what the Supreme Court did today.
So by implication now?
By necessary implication, Julius Abure, from our understanding of the judgment, ceases to be the national chairman of the party, having outlived his tenure under the party's constitution. And the party, it was also before the court that the party had established and appointed a caretaker committee in his place, so that the two lower courts had no business whatsoever going into the case filed before the two lower courts.
So what's your name?
So my name is Barrister Chinedu Eze. Thank you very much.
All right, you just finished listening to the Labour Party legal representative explaining the court session today. Meanwhile, Nigerian activist and lawyer DG Adeyanju has stated that President Bola Tinubu will fund the Obedient movement in 2027. He also claimed that Tinubu will encourage former Labour Party presidential candidate Peter Obi to ignore the proposed coalition of Run Solo again in 2027. Adeyanju insisted that President Tinubu would not allow the coalition being championed by former Vice President Atiku Abubakar of the People's Democratic Party to succeed. The activist stated this via a series of posts on his Facebook page. According to him, the activist also rubbished the former ruling party PDP, pointing out that the party must die in the hands of the Federal Capital Territory Minister Nyesom Wike for the opposition to be better. According to him, he disclosed that the party has not been active as a party that was meant to be a voice of the opposition. Now, it's time to rush ahead for a news analysis segment. We'll take a very short break. When we return, we'll head into the analysis segment. We'll be discussing some of the issues read out on the World News at 6. Do kindly stay with us. Joined via the telephone with Barrister Fred Nzako. Barrister Fred Nzako, good evening and thank you for joining me today on the World News at 6.
Glad to be with you.
Thank you so much, Barrister. I sincerely do appreciate you taking your time to be with us today. Barrister, it's quite unfortunate because in Lagos State today, or rather yesterday evening, a scavenger died by a military grenade. Now, these scavengers, you know, they like to scavenge metal. One person died, 3 has been hospitalized. The question is, what will a military grenade be doing at a dump site? Who would have been careless with it? And the police actually came there and saw 3 other grenades, you know, on that particular dump site where they usually collate, you know, these metals and all of that. How do you describe the situation? It actually caused panic in that axis of Idi Araba.
Well, it should really cause panicking because there was no basis for military grenade to be seen at a dump site. And one cannot explain what would have happened. And it's very important that a very thorough investigation be conducted, especially since they recovered on some about 2-3 unexploded grenades.
Okay.
At least with that, they will trace the origin of such grenades and be able to identify what would have happened. And from there, they will know who had dumped the grenades there and the reason for such dumping. Because it beats anybody's imagination that the grenade will be dumped at such a site, at a dump site, and what would have been the intention of for such a dumping. So I think it is a clear responsibility of security agencies, especially the police bomb squad and the other concerned arms of the security community, to really unravel that and assure Nigerians that we are still safe. Because if grenades can be placed at dump site, then that it is a very long story about the level of security in our land.
All right. Barrister Friday Nzako, the ruling All Progressives Congress refuted allegations suggesting that there is a rift between President Bola Ahmed Tinubu and Vice President Shettima. So there were, speculations that in 2027 the president might change the vice president. That is, he may not run or re-campaign with, the current vice president. Now, the vice president has been quiet for a while, despite the outcry and a couple of issues concerning the administration. I want you to also remember that one of the reasons why you have such stories go viral is that the president's political advisor, Hakim Baba Ahmed, resigned. He had actually resigned 2 weeks ago. They didn't give us details, the reason why he actually resigned. But, it's possible that a notable point of contention was what arose in April 2024 when the defense minister, Bello Matawale, criticized northern appointees, including Baba Ahmed, for failing to defend the administration amidst accusations of misrepresentations. Now, when this information came out, a lot of Nigerians went to say, it may be possible because while the president was the governor of Lagos State, he actually had almost 3 different deputy governors. So do we see that kind of scenario playing out again at the federal level? And what would be the reason, if at all, he may not re-campaign with the vice president?
The age-long saying that there is no smoke without fire seems to be very alive in Nigeria. That whenever issues are spoken in hushed tones, you will find out that there is a fire behind every smoke. Recall that Mr. Hakim Baba Ahmed,
yes,
he's the special advisor to Mr. President, but in the office of the Vice President, in which case he is directly advising the Vice President. Yes, the presidency is the same. That is why you say he's the special advisor to the. It should be called special advisor to the presidency. Now attached to the office of the Vice President. Now he resigned. But many Nigerians didn't know about such a resignation.
Yes.
But many Nigerians are beginning to feel that there is some kind of coldness between Mr. President and his vice. And those who are thinking in that direction are only thinking in that direction because each time Mr. President travels, he never transmits power to his vice president. I think that from inception of the presidency, Mr. Vice President has never tested the office of acting president, which means that Mr. President had never transmitted power to him whenever he traveled. Even when the constitution provides that if the travel will last for beyond 21 days, then such power will be transmitted. But there is a way, the presidency always has a way out of that to circumvent that position, because Mr. President has traveled in some cases beyond 21 days. But what happens is that when he travels to one country, from that country they will announce that he has finished his assignment there and has moved on to another country, which is by way of revalidating the trip, in which case the first 19 or 18 or 20 days had expired, and another counting will now resume. And before you know it, that way, Mr. President will move from one country to another up to the third country, and power will never be transmitted to the Vice President. If there was no love lost between such distinguished presidential gentlemen, I guess and I believe that there must at least one a transmission of power to the Vice President. And now people are opposition elements and those who are uncomfortable with the nature of governance in the country are beginning to mock the Vice President as being the Vice President for condolences and the naming ceremonies. Such
Okay.
over and against the initial understanding when Mr. Vice President said that he will be in charge of security and Mr. President will be in charge of economy. Now,
True.
even the security, he's not in charge. They say he's now in charge of naming ceremonies and condolences. But that is by way of political mockery.
Yes.
But underlying the whole thing shows that Mr. Vice President is not enjoying his office the way he anticipated. And whether he will continue in 2027 remains in the realm of speculation. The office of the governor is different from the office of the president.
No, I know that the office of the governor is different from the office of the president.
We cannot say because the then Governor Bola Tinubu worked with 3 different deputy governors that he will replicate a similar character at the presidential level. There are 2 different scenarios. There are 2 different environments.
But Barrister, I don't think you would blame any critical analyst following the political trend in this country to have that train of thought, because a couple of persons feel that the president is trying to replicate his activity or his modus operandi in Lagos at the federal level. So is it surprising if a lot of Nigerians think that is the same MO, he's operating at that particular hierarchy or that particular level?
Yeah, I wouldn't blame any analyst to think in that direction, but my own point is that those analysts must know that not only that the times have changed, the situations and the circumstances have also changed. We are now talking about the nation where you have 6 geopolitical zones with a major division between the north and the south. So I think that. It does not follow that what he did in between 1999 and 2007, he may repeat them now. I do not think so.
All right, but Barrister Fred Nzako, let's look at this as objectively as possible, specifically on the activities and the potent role of the vice president. During the administration of Muhammadu Buhari, you had a Professor Yemi Oshibajo literally moribund in his activities. I mean, the only time that he was active, immediately, reports got to the president outside the country then because he was undergoing treatment. A couple of his security aides were taken away from him. Some responsibilities were taken away from him. He literally became a silent partner, literally silent. So is it surprising that you have the same, disposition of the vice president this time around? And could this be the reason why some northerners, specifically the Northern Elders Forum or some northern political bureaucrats, are really dissatisfied with the president concerning whatever agreement they may have had, during the campaign?
If anybody is dissatisfied with Mr. President, such a person should first and foremost be dissatisfied with our constitution.
Okay.
Our constitution has made the office of the vice president and that of the governor to be dependent on the whims of Mr. President or the governor. If the governor decides to bench his deputy, in fact, in some states, the wife of the governor is even more active than the deputy governor. And at the federal level, in some cases, sometimes the chief of staff will be stronger than the vice president.
Exactly.
It's essentially because our constitution has failed to very clearly define the role of the vice president or that of the president. That was why the late Chief Chukwuemeka Ezeife, some former governor of Anambra State, once described the deputy governor as a spare tire. And that appendage, that description is still valid up to today. And the spare tire is never sought when the tires are okay. That means it's only when any of the tires get punctured or has an issue. That's when people remember their spare tire. And if the tires don't have problem, then the spare tire will remain idle and moribund in the pit of the car. So, and that is a very clear example of what the vice president and the deputy governors are saying in Nigeria. Okay. In America, for example, the vice president is the head of the Senate. He has a role. And that is why we keep saying that if we are copying America, we should copy America full and well and adopt a true fiscal federalism that will help move our country forward. This is the idea of over-centralization of power. not only at the center, but now in the hands of one man that you call the president is not helping the country.
Okay.
You can imagine where the president and the vice run on the same ticket and they have voted the same ticket. Their fate is the same. You recall that David Leon of Bayelsa State lost the seat of the governor because of the infraction with the certification of his deputy. So when the fate of the president is tied to that of the vice president, why wouldn't the vice president be given adequate responsibility to discharge his duties as provided by the Constitution? But then again, the Constitution is silent on what are the duties of the vice president. The vice president will only discharge the duties as assigned to him by the president. Making the vice president redundant is only when Mr. President decides to make use of his own vice that you see the vice being active. And that is where, when the vice now becomes very active and Mr. President becomes jealous that the vice is outshining,
yes,
now he now tries to also bench the vice. The experience between President Obasanjo and the Vice President Atiku Abubakar has told Nigerians that there is need for the Vice President to be given specific role. Now, you mentioned that of Buhari and Osibajo.
Yes.
You know, it took a lot before Buhari agreed to transfer power to Osibajo. It was the same vein that even when Yar'Adua was ill, critically ill on the dying bed, the presidency was running without the vice president.
Yes, they refused to carry Goodluck Jonathan along.
Having any power until there was a kind of an elite protest that now brought out the doctrine of necessity that made power to be transmitted to the vice president, the then vice president, Goodluck Jonathan. So, if you now look at the political history of Nigeria at that level, you see that it is high time that our constitution be tweaked to give clear, defined roles for the vice president and that of the deputy governor, because they were not elected to just be there on attending condolences and many ceremonies.
All right, Barrister Fred Nzako, let's move on to, before I would have loved to delve into that more, because the Northerners from the North Central are saying that in 2027, the APC should actually get their vice from their region. And it is not surprising that they're renewing their demand for either the presidency or the vice presidency in the upcoming 2027 general elections. They're also asking other opposition party members to ensure that their vice for their presidential candidates would come from that region. In fact, there are representatives from Plateau, Nasarawa, Benue, Niger, Kogi, and Kwara State. They convened in Abuja. So again, why is this clamor coming on now? Is it based on the fact that there is some authenticity to the fact that Shettima may not be the vice in 2027? Remember that the president has not officially declared to us, do you understand, that he's going to campaign in 2027? But then there are statements that he has made in passing to indicate that he will be running or be the APC's flag bearer in 2027. Is it compulsory that the vice president must come from the north?
Those are primordial sentiments and primordial demands that go further to fuel the speculation and the conspiracy theory that Mr. President may, after all, not continue with his vice.
Okay.
By the time you juxtapose such demands with the realities and the situation of the vice president and the mockery by political opponents of the vice president, it tends to give such credence to the fact that, after all, Mr. President may be thinking in a different direction. It may give the impression that, well, it is possible that Mr. President may not want to continue with his vice. And to make matters worse, before the vice president is appointed, or rather, before the vice presidential candidate is appointed, the presidential candidate would have known his own stand. He would have sat well on his position as a candidate of the party, and then he will now decide who becomes his running mate. And that is where it becomes very easy for the president to drop the vice president if he so wishes. But of course, political bantering and geopolitical and ethnic consideration may not allow him to be reckless with such a decision. The demand by the North Central is not an unnecessary demand. Not only that it is coming too early in time, but they should be more concerned about the position of the vice president. Is it the same vice president that we are saying is almost redundant, that they are angling to go and get?
I don't
Just
even
for the sake of
understand.
answering the vice president, they should put their energies together to fire up the National Assembly to amend our constitution to the effect that the vice president will be meaningfully engaged by the constitution so that he will have his role clearly cut out. The same way we are saying that the role of the traditional rulers in national politics should be clearly cut out. But even the traditional ruler is even more recognized than that of the vice president. Because the traditional ruler is a chiefdom, is in his own domain, his chiefdom. He's a king in his own domain. But the vice president is a king without kingdom, because his kingdom is tied to the kingdom of the president and can be dispensed with at any time. I think that any meaningful political discussion today or around the office of the vice president will be the one that will firm up that office and give it more responsible and a more constitutionally structured role, so that the very best of the vice president will come out. Because anybody who is the vice president is also, by the provision of the constitution, is somebody who is capable of being a president. So if you now elect a man or a woman who is capable of being a president, and you bench him in the office of the vice president, he is being underutilized and unemployed. So the very best thing we do is to give a greater employment and greater impetus to that office, so that our vice president will deploy his talent and resources towards serving the nation, instead of just sitting idly by and waiting and watching out for the direction and the directives of Mr. President. It is not enough.
All right, Barrister, finally, before I let you go, because there are quite a number of issues I want you to talk about. Barrister, the death toll in Bokos Plateau State has increased now to 52. All right. The chairman of Bokos Cultural Development Council, Farmasum Fudang, confirmed the development to journalists today, and they said this followed the recovery of 40 more corpses on Wednesday and Thursday night. Barrister, this is barely a week after what transpired in Uromi in Edo State. Now, you said something that during the campaign, the Vice President Kashim Shettima is supposed to focus on security, right? And the president's mantra was to focus on the economy. We have not heard any condolence message from the presidency or his vice about the recent killing in Bokos local government area in Jos. We have not heard any of the senators in the National Assembly condemn the killing of these Fulani terrorists in Jos, Bokos local government area. We've not heard any of the northern influencers come out in rage and demand compensation for the victims of those who were killed, families of those who were killed in Bokos Plateau State local government. So please, I want to ask you, when the citizens decide to take it upon themselves to protect their community, and instances some innocent persons may fall victim because of the geographical location or ethnic location they belong to, would you blame them when you're seeing the imbalance in the reaction from the hierarchy, from the presidency, or even at the Senate?
I've always maintained that the failure of government, especially the security agencies and the leaders of the country, to do what is right, to be just, fair, and equitable in their treatment of all people in the land, will naturally gravitate people towards self-help. I've always said that. People will naturally resort to self-help when they lose confidence and when they lose faith in government. When they lose confidence that government will protect them. When they lose faith that the collective mandate they are giving to the people, their capacity that they have surrendered to the government is to be utilized in their very best interest. When such faith and confidence is lacking, the natural tendency is for people to resort to self-help. Recall that a few years ago, there was massive killing in Barakaladi and the Bokos local government areas of Plateau State. This is not the first time. So one expected that such massive killing that we witnessed a few years back should not be repeated. But today, it is repeated. It is repeated. And we are now counting in scores, in tens of people that lost their lives. For how long will this continue? And meanwhile, the fingers are pointing in the same direction, Fulani herdsmen. Everywhere, the same fingers are pointing in the same direction, Fulani herdsmen. But when one or two terrorists are killed, then people will begin to shout, they are hunters. Hunters that are moving from if Nigeria was to be Europe, Nigeria would have been maybe about minimum of 4 countries in Nigeria. So you now hunt from one country to another. You now hunt from Katsina or Kaduna to Edo State en route Port Harcourt. What does it tell you? Meanwhile, each time people shout and cry that they are being killed, the people in authority who are supposed to condemn the killing and take action, because it does not end in condemnation.
Yes.
Condemnation is mere mouthing. We want action to be taken because the life of everybody is important.
Yes.
If it's not important to the government, it is important to the family. It is important to the loved ones. So there's no way we will allow some people to be killed and then we protect others as if they are superior to others in the same country where everyone is equal before the law. That is not tolerable. That is not acceptable. And that is why the killings in Barikin Ladi or in Boko this time around is not only condemnable, but a very big shame to the collective security of the country. So also the killing in Ozuwane, because there was also killing in Ozuwane in Enugu State. At the same time that they are talking about the unfortunate incidents in Uromi, it now downplayed the massive killing that happened in Enugu State, in Ozuwane local government. So why would a certain set of people continue to cause heartache for others? And when the people now react because of the failure of government to protect their interests, you begin to call them bad names. These are some of the little things that build up bad blood in a country that affect the unity of a country. We are saying that Nigeria's unity is very fragile. We're even making it more fragile and even threatening such unity by the way we act and by the way the security agencies treat all sections of the country. The terrorists in the north are being treated as herdsmen. But the people who are agitating for self-determination in the east, government will call them terrorists. What kind of nomenclature is that?
It's terrible, Barrister Fred.
So these are things that make Nigeria a laughing stock in the Committee of Nations and make Nigeria one of the countries of the world that is the deadliest to live in. Go and check the indices. Nigeria is treated as a country that is one of the most dangerous to inhabit in Nigeria, in the world. And such terrible statistics is not the type that will continue to harbor in a democracy where every man is not only equal before God, but also equal before the law.
All right, Barrister Fred Nsako, thank you so much. That was quite extensive and very in-depth. I do sincerely appreciate your input.
Many thanks.
Thank you very much. To wrap up here again at the top stories, Tinubu's political advisor, Hakim Baba Ahmed, resigned. You also heard that death toll in Plateau attack hits 52. Scavenger dies, 3 hospitalized as military grenade explodes in Lagos. WTO warns U.S. tariffs may shrink global trade. Court halts pro-weekend rally in Bayelsa. Court slams heavy restriction on Akpabio, Natasha, Senate, others. APC speaks on replacing Shettima as Tinubu's vice in 2027. North Central push for slot. That's a wrap on the world news at 6. My name is Esther Wachuku. Good evening and thank you for listening. The Evening Rush comes up at 7 p.m. Do kindly stay with us.